Hey, hello, welcome to Signal Noise. My name is Brian Lamar. I'm your co-host along with Andrew DeSillis. Hello, Andrew.
Good morning, Brian. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. By the time you're listening to this, you could be married. Is that correct?
That depending on when it comes out, yes, that's a possibility. We are
All right,
8 days,
congratulations.
5 hours, and 20 minutes out.
Wow.
As recording, no, not counting or anything. Can't wait for the wedding. Looking forward to it. I'm excited for you guys and your families, and I know that it's y'all have known each other basically your whole lives, so it's pretty cool.
And Brian, you even rented a tuxedo.
I have a tux, and I'm so excited about it. Your wedding's on a Saturday. I'm picking up on a Thursday. I'm a little bit hesitant to do this, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be going out wearing the tux Thursday and Friday. Maybe even a lunch date on a Friday before. I don't want to mess up the tux and come in with it dirty or anything, but I'm pretty like, when else am I going to have a tux for 4 days? I don't own a tux. Maybe I should buy a tux, but
I think you got to rock it for Sunday brunch as well.
Yeah.
right, exactly. I don't return until Monday. So yes, Sunday brunch. Thank you, Dan. Which reminds me, we have to introduce our wonderful guest today. It's Dan Entrup. He's the co-founder of AggKnowledge. Welcome, Dan. How are you, sir?
Hey, great Brian, great Andrew, great to be here. Excited to chat with you guys today.
Dan,
Yeah.
do you own a tuxedo, or do you rent one when the occasion
I
arises?
do. So I do. I've probably had to get it adjusted, taken out and taken in about 6 or 7 times over the years. So I'm probably due for a new one, but I've gotten some good wear out of one I got years ago.
Excellent. We'll put you in the black tie club then. But Dan, why don't you?
Next event we go to, we'll all rock
Yeah.
tux and some top hats as well.
You know
Right.
what? That would be a great move for a conference, wouldn't it? Just roll up in the tuxedo.
Absolutely.
The
Yeah,
formalization of market research.
well, speaking of, and we'll get into Dan at some point, I guess, but I've been to a few conferences, and you have too. Both of you all have, and some of the companies kind of dress up, and one company's dressing up as captains, and some companies are known for kind of dressing alike and kind of standing out. I always think that's interesting. I think the tux, a very dignified conference attendee or booth would be fantastic.
It's certainly a conversation starter at least.
Right. You were asking Dan a question before we kind of got off back on the tux, Andrew.
No worries. I was just going to have Dan, introduce us a little bit to himself, his background, and to AggKnowledge.
Awesome, happy to. So, I'm co-founder of AggKnowledge. We're a data management and enrichment service that's purpose-built for knowledge networks. So our clients are expert networks, survey panels, kind of overall market research, executive search and recruiters. We also work with universities, really anyone who reaches out to people based on their experience or expertise. We help them to keep those profiles really up to date and then deeply enriched, so that they can better match people for the right opportunities. And prior to this, my career has been focused on sort of overall primary research services, I would say is the theme. Started off in more qualitative research. I spent about 6.5 years in top expert networks before moving over to the data space in 2018. I'd seen a lot of our clients, especially hedge funds, starting to incorporate more and more large data sets into their research and building out data science and engineering teams. And so I've gone on a journey in the data world, and now really excited that for the past 2.5 years after co-founding the business with two other co-founders, to really be kind of combining a lot of that knowledge of both the workflow from a more qualitative kind of expert based side, and for human knowledge, I guess would be the way I'd define that, as well as more of the quantitative side of how people think about using data either for analytics or to be more descriptive for their better targeting. So it's been a really fun journey, and yeah, just I'm a total geek for the industry overall. Love to talk all things data, all things human knowledge, especially with everything going on with AI that I'm sure we'll touch on in some of this conversation. So excited to be here chatting with you guys.
Guys, I met you at SampleCon, and I'm not just saying this. I think that was my favorite presentation of the conference, which, by the way, I missed the first day and the last day, so I was only there for the full one day.
Well, I did share the stage with 4 other people, so that could just be
Yes.
credit to them because they also did a
Well-
phenomenal job. But I really enjoyed our conversation. It was great to meet you, and that was a fun one to put together and to get up on stage and share.
It was great, and I strategically I always strategically sit somewhere at a conference, and I sat at a table close to the front. And what's interesting, Andrew, is that at SampleCon, he was on the stage with Bob Fossen, I think was moderating, and it was some people from Walmart talking about data and quality and sample, and it was fantastic. But then there was like roundtable discussions afterwards during a break for like, I don't know, 30 minutes. And I got them to choose my table as the roundtable discussion, so I got to have lots of this continuing discussions afterwards. But I did love what you spoke about. I think it was called "What's My Age Again."
Yep. A little
It
Blink
was
182
brilliant.
reference in there.
I love kind of a quick overview of what your presentation was about.
Yeah, so it was really about we called it "What's My Age Again?" The real non-fraudulent expert experience, and a lot of this is actually the basis for starting AggKnowledge.
Mm.
So my co-founders and I were catching up, and we were actually talking about our own experience being part of many different panels and expert networks, and whether that's B2B or B2C, kind of all different modalities of research and participation. And we were sort of constantly being asked the same questions over and over again. Sometimes those were questions people should know the answer to, other times they were questions that we had already answered, and other times they were things that like they should know not to reach out to us on. And so I talked a lot about how many times I've been asked to opine on clinical dental topics and to confirm whether or not I'm a dentist. And that's because I worked in data strategy at one of the largest healthcare products distribution companies that has a big arm that does dentistry. And well, it's probably okay to reach out to me once or twice for those types of things. After saying no about, I think, 57 times, it starts to really degrade the expert experience and reduce the likelihood of me responding again. And
You
what's
didn't
my
go to
age
dental
again was
school?
in regards. What's that?
You didn't go to dental school?
I still have not. I may be considering it at this point because apparently the industry is telling me that should have been my path, and it seems I would have had some pretty good economic opportunity to participate in market research had I done that. But the what's my age again was really in regards to I think it was 137 times I was asked how old I am, and sometimes screening out right on that. So I put in my actual age every time, and then I screen out and, find out that it was a study for people in a completely different age range. And the part that was sort of most frustrating about that was with many of those providers, I've provided them my birth date. So they should be able to calculate that. And if I fit the criteria, they should reach out to me. If I don't, I should never be receiving that request. And so a lot of it was part about respecting the respondents. And I think that was kind of one of the overall themes that some of the other presenters spoke about, and what the experience looks like, especially when they're getting reached out to by so many different market research firms. I showed an example of my inbox, and it's sometimes it's 10 or 15 different requests on a daily basis. And I'm actually missing a lot of those and missing a lot of the ones that would actually be relevant where I would be the right fit. And then also just from an efficiency standpoint and overall research integrity, reducing potential instances of fraud and embellishment, our view has always been that if you're better at the targeting and sort of reach out to people that you already know will likely more likely to pre-screen into something, you can get better responses, improve the overall experience, but also reduce instances of fraud. So when we talk about fraud and embellishment detection, prevention, our positioning on it and where AggKnowledge helps businesses is more upfront of how can you even reduce it from even happening in the first place. And then of course there's a number of tools that and people doing some great stuff further downstream to further prevent it and detect it, especially in studies, so before it gets to impacting any of the research results. But we think there's a huge opportunity to just be more efficient up front, and so much benefit that comes from that.
Well, I can somewhat relate. This is probably why it resonated with me is that when I joined ROI Rocket, I was still under a non-compete. We wanted to be certain that I wasn't violating that for a few months. And so my job title was Director of Network Quality. And, in the industry, we know sample network, right? Or partner network. But that really must have resonated with expert networks. So I still get people reaching out to me today, which I haven't quantified, I should, about, our IT network and
Yeah.
and what decisions I make in terms of, those types of questions. So I can certainly resonate with that.
Yeah, you've probably gotten plenty of 5G LTE requests
Yes.
as well over the years with the word network in there. But that's a lot of what we're trying to help people do from a data standpoint. And Brian, I'll call you out on this. I think when we first met, I know you told me you had a slight sense that maybe what we did at AggKnowledge was agricultural data.
Yeah.
And I said
The
the
double
irony of
G.
that is if you use my data, the data would actually help you know that that's not what we do and help you be better targeted. But I have received requests about agricultural data, and because people just hear ag knowledge with a G, even though it's two G's, and it really stands for aggregation, because
Mhm.
we stitch together a lot of different data sets. That is something that when we say it, I have received outreach about agricultural data. So yeah, I think definitely understanding the context of not only someone's role, but what it means within the industry that they work in. One other funny anecdote for you, we've seen a number of data providers that classify an MD at Goldman Sachs as a physician because the title is
Oh, wow.
empty. And
Wow.
Oh, wow.
so we've spent a lot of time looking for these patterns and revising that before the data problems get to our end clients. But there's a lot of instances, especially depending on when people applied AI or machine learning or different rule sets, where a lot of that still sneaks through. But that's always one of my favorite ones to see is investment banks that somehow have 1,000 physicians working there.
One thing that just keeps kind of occurring to me as we talk about this is, and maybe this is cynical, or I don't know how you want to put it, but like, gosh, I thought we were better than this. Like as a starting point, and we know that particularly for consumer research, that like very repetitive nature of demographic screening and things like that, like we're aware that that's an issue. But it's really surprising to me to hear that you're part of like a B2B expert network and receiving dental requests or agricultural requests and things like that. I know at ROI Rocket, our panels are incredibly well profiled. And you raise an interesting point, Dan, about fraud and about poor quality research, where, you know, if you only deploy the survey to respondents who are pre-targeted as anything, right? Like when I register for the panel, if I say I'm an IT decision maker, then I'm by default not a dentist, right? And so by sending it to the wrong people, you're like inviting fraud. And if I was a fraudster and I had a fake account, like that account can only be one thing. So it seems that this like broad distribution of surveys and not really tightening it down, oh gosh, that just invites so much inaccuracy. And I know for you as well, I had my parents join some online panels when I started in the industry about 10 years ago. My parents are both physicians, and so I was like, hey, you guys can probably make some good money, right? And my mom was screening out of like every survey because she was
Yeah.
63. And for whatever reason, healthcare research, they seemed like to talk to, younger physicians who have more runway before they're going to retire. And it's like, why are they sending them to her? They know her birthday. And for some studies, it was like exactly who they wanted to talk to because she had 30 years of experience. But for the others, she was just getting frustrated and she stopped taking them. She had a very low threshold for terming out
Well,
people she was
what you
putting
just
out of it.
described is actually
Yeah.
fairly common, and I had said in the my presentation, so I had tracked the outreach that I was getting over 15 months and kind of quantified what that experience looked like overall and what the acceptance rate was, what the screen out rate was, and I said, had I not been doing that to show this and because I'm building this business, I would have unsubscribed to most panels and networks that I'm a part of. And we had quantified it a couple years ago with one of the largest expert networks that I've been working with, where every time someone responded to something and it didn't yield a successful consult or paid engagement, they would lose about 25% of their likelihood of ever responding again. And so
Wow.
your mother's experience is actually not uncommon. And there's the other thing that I think goes into it is just the depth of data that people are capturing. So I think as an industry, to your point about, weren't we as an industry better than that? So
Mhm.
profiling does exist. But if I were to pick apart profiling, what's usually missing is, well, one, you don't know what you didn't ask, and you can only ask so many questions. So in the example of a physician, I'm not going to ask a physician every single drug that they've ever prescribed and what the counts are of that, but that's a data set that I can buy. And that's actually a data set that we provide at AggKnowledge. So if you need top prescribers of, say, like a certain GLP-1, we know exactly who those people are, who will likely effectively, like I mentioned, they're sort of pre-screening into that. And you don't have to cast an even wider net, which is then going to reduce the number of opportunities that actually yield something for the majority of participants or initial respondents to those screeners. The other part to it though is, well, I'd say two other things. One is structure. So I've seen a lot of profiling that is just free text fields. So asking me what company that I worked at, and I'll give you an example. I used to work at FactSet. I would put in FactSet. Someone else might put in FactSet Research Systems Inc. Someone else might put in FactSet Research or FactSet.com. There's so many different permutations that people can put in. And so when you're lacking structured entities in there, that tends to be another area. And then there's every permutation of misspelling that we've seen as well. So even when people are getting the right sort of format right, we've seen like every version of misspelling. And then the final thing is profile information changes. And so, I've moved around in my career. We've all worked at different companies. Making sure that you're not reaching out to people thinking that they work at one place and they're qualified for something and associating their responses with, say, a company that has 10,000 people or more, when really they actually moved to a three-person startup and they moved a year and a half ago or even longer ago. And so, and then on the flip side, unlocking people where maybe they were conflicted from participating in something because of the subject matter and where they worked. But again, they no longer work there. They are actually are available now to consult. And so a big part of it also is in addition to just the initial profiling, it's the ongoing profiling, and you don't want to spend too much of people's time administratively either on the provider side or putting that onus on the respondent, but you really want to, make sure that that data is always kept up to date and fresh so that you're reaching out to people based on the latest information and just making for a better experience overall.
Did you reach out to some of those companies and say, "Hey, I'm not a freaking dentist, stop it"? Did that happen?
Been a great business development tactic actually for us at AggKnowledge. So a lot of our client relationships have come from that of telling
Nice.
people, hey, if you had our data,
Yeah,
here's why you would not have reached out to me, but here are the types of people that you should have reached out to. So
right.
I get voice of customer requests all the time for certain technologies that not only do I not use, but I wouldn't even be in a position. I don't work in an industry that would use them, or I'm not in a role that would use them, or I'm not at a company with 10,000 people or more, and it's very clear that that's what I screened out on. And so I actually almost always give that feedback, and we're we're very fortunate. I think we work with many of the largest clients in the industry, conducting really massive research operations, and it's been really cool just to see the impact and to help them with this. And it really is like a true partnership of how we think about improving the overall industry and the overall experience. And again, I keep using the term research integrity, like protecting that for the end clients and being able to deliver them the right people faster. Um, Another trend that happened, and Brian, you had done a webinar a couple of months ago, and you had a kind of a funny anecdote in there that made me laugh, and I think was another time that I had reached out to you and said it was just spot on. But you gave kind of one of these examples of when the end clients parameters don't always match what's reality. And sometimes that's with the qualification criteria. I think the example you gave was someone wants
Yeah.
to speak with 1,000 Fortune 500 CEOs. And just right there, the irony of there only being 500 of them in existence. And we've all seen real requests along those lines, maybe not as bold as that one, but along those lines where sometimes the people just don't actually exist. And then I think the other thing has been a prioritization of speed over everything. Speed is easy to measure, it's easy to quantify. Quality is not. And clients expect both speed and quality. And that's what people ultimately, I think the winners in the market are really delivering. And what I am glad to see is now people can deliver quality at speed, I think more so than ever before with proper use of data and available technology out there. But we did go through probably a 4 or 5 year period in the industry, and I think finally really started to turn the corner on it, where the prioritization of speed meant for larger spray and pray tactics, like casting a much wider net, and in turn further degrading the respondent experience, and the likelihood, like Andrew, back to the case of your mother, that the likelihood of ever responding again, because of not getting selected for things and taking that time out of the day, thinking there was an opportunity to participate in something.
Absolutely. We have a healthcare panel. I have a lot of healthcare clients. My ears absolutely perked up when you said, you have access to these like prescriber data sets. How does Acknowledge actually work? Like if we were going to start working together and have you enrich our data sets, right? Is it like a panel match kind of thing? Are you giving us access to a different kind of software? Are just like kind of walk me through what the service actually looks like?
Yeah, sure. So we have two primary workflows that we enable. One we call update and enrich, which is taking an existing database of people, matching on them, bringing them all up to date to today's point in time, and then keeping those profiles up to date, as well as deeply enriching those profiles. And then the other workflow we call discover, which is how you go and recruit new people. And all of it, kind of going like one layer up, relies on data partnerships and data acquisition that we've done with best in class providers across people work experience data sets, company firmographic data sets. There's a category that we kind of coined the term vendor graphics, but it's what product services, tools, technologies companies are using. A lot of these data sets exist as standalones and typically for other use cases. Some are actively used in like the recruiting or the sales and marketing space, and so what we do is we license a bunch of them across all different methodologies with the goal of providing the most up-to-date, comprehensive, and complete data. And oftentimes that actually means working with multiple data vendors in each category to make sure that we can really be holistic and up to date. And we stitch it all together. So we do all that entity resolution work. We structure that data. So people work at companies, companies use vendors, vendors are decided on by people, and making all of that linkage along the way. And then with industry specifics, like healthcare has its own specific data model just because of how much depth is in that product, but really deliver that to help keep that existing database, like as I mentioned, like always up to date, and really activate the existing database there. And sometimes it actually starts with a big matching exercise of even just identifying these people's kind of online public professional profiles. So many people maintain online profiles, or there's company websites that they show up on, and when they leave there, they're removed from. So kind of keeping tabs on kind of the open like public web of what's available out there, and making sure that we can bring that into one place, but also allow people to link out to those different sites, so they can sort of see it for themselves. So the first part usually is that like matching exercise of identifying who is John123 at gmail.com. We know John said he worked at Microsoft 10 years ago. Does John still work at Microsoft, and in what role? We can go and ask John that question, but maybe we were actually reaching out to a Microsoft email address, and that person no longer works there anymore. So it's a lot of like data hygiene as well, of making sure that you're reaching out to people based on the latest information, not just so that you're qualifying them properly, and improving the experience there, but also so you can even make sure you can get in touch with them in the first place, as people move companies all the time, and when they're signed up with like a business email for something, that may become undeliverable along the way. But we deliver data programmatically, primarily via API. We want people to bring this data directly into their own native systems and workflows, and we've seen just a lot of really cool applications of how people have continued to integrate different pieces of it and have a really robust roadmap that we're always open to sharing with our clients and collaborate with them. And a lot of it is driven by where else we can really help with some of those efficiencies or bottlenecks that take place in the process. And or we're at a point now where we've just received some phenomenal feedback from people on the impact it's had ultimately on their bottom line. Primarily it goes back to that kind of speed and quality and being able to deliver better service to their end clients, especially in such a competitive environment that we all operate in.
Yeah, I think it's very intuitive how this would increase sampling efficiency, how this would increase quality. I'm curious if you have any hard numbers around how this improves like panelist retention. It's very expensive to recruit folks to panels, especially B2B healthcare expert network type resources. And so increasing the amount of research that those folks ultimately participate in is huge. Do people typically stay for one more survey? Are they doubling the amount of time that they spend? I'm just curious if you have visibility, because that would have to come from your clients, right? You don't have
Yeah.
visibility. So I'm curious if you have any hard numbers that you could share with us.
Yeah, and so being a data provider, like we're not connected into their systems. We don't see any of their engagement, but I think part of that just good partnership is a lot of our clients have shared back that feedback with us. Overall, what we and this is one of the things that we actually tell people to measure is measure the ratio of outreach to successful respondent and participation. We actually want that number to go down. So you should be able to reach out to fewer people because you're reaching out to a more targeted group of people and still get the same, if not more, ultimately more. Another way to improve that ratio would be to improve the denominator. So getting more of the right people to participate. Overall, I'd say if I were to probably average some of the feedback that we've gotten from our clients who have shared it with us, and I think a number of them have been very diligent on doing controlled studies. I think we all
Mhm.
we all work in market research. There's
I
a lot of
know.
different methodologists and analysts and data scientists. So, it's one of those areas where I'm really excited because when you first tell someone who's sophisticated with data to measure it, it's like, uh-oh, like I really hope it works. And it has. And people have seen sort of like usually it's around a 25% improvement in terms of like the response rates. We've heard much higher. We've also seen and gotten some feedback on the percentage of profiles that were out of date in anyone's existing database. And this is particularly for B2B. So looking at people's professional work experience and the employers that they work at, those numbers have typically actually been between 45 and 75% of profiles in any static database are out of date at the point where we come in and kind of do that initial batch update. And so while some people have this wow, that's terrifying moment, what I think it really is just how much of the database they haven't been able to activate over the years that they're now able to unlock. And so we're seeing that people are returning to participating in different studies because they're finally starting to get more outreach that is more targeted and it's yielding other results. And one other thing I'll mention just to talk about kind of the overall industry and not just about AggKnowledge, but is the the introduction of AI into the space. And I say that very broadly, but specifically talking about like AI moderated. The percentage hit rate of getting accepted to participate in, say, like an AI moderated expert call is actually a lot higher than human led. And it often comes down to scheduling and how much N you can actually achieve in the same amount of time. So a human moderator can only do one call at once. And especially if these are hour-long calls, and oftentimes the people conducting calls are very busy with other elements of their job. So they may only be able to conduct, say, like maybe it's 5 calls that they do in 1 week on something, say like a busy investment professional. Now with AI they may be able to conduct 100. So what that actually is 95 other people who otherwise probably would have been passed on for timing purposes and availability now get to participate in those and participate on their own schedule and almost immediately from when they complete that screener, as opposed to having to wait and having it go back to the clients. I don't know what date this will get published, but as of today, yesterday, I was on a panel about expert-based research, and one of the participants mentioned that while we were actually conducting this panel discussion live in a forum, uh, he had expert calls that were running, being conducted by an AI moderator, and was looking forward to reading the results of those. And so I think, not to get into the whole debate about AI and the quality, there's a lot that we could unpack there, and I think a lot of pros and cons. But overall, from like an expert experience standpoint, you actually end up unlocking a lot of other benefits, particularly around scheduling the likelihood of these interactions actually taking place, and then pepper into that better initial targeting that will effectively pre-screen you, or make, have a higher likelihood that you're going to make it through the screeners, just even further bolsters that. And so I think we're starting to see more people actually revisit that participation. And when we were starting this business, we did calls with probably about 150 experts across different databases, and then we actually ran our own surveys on a bunch of others. And a lot of people told us that if we were doing this and could help the industry improve this, they would actually be likely to participate again. As many of them had said, I no longer participate in these types of engagements, and had just given us that feedback why. So it just comes back to a little bit of that respect, that time, the time you take to fill out things. How do you get rid of those administrative burdens, and making sure that and I'll keep saying you're non-fraudulent, as there's so much talk about fraudulent in the industry. The non-fraudulent people, you're really getting the best out of them and making an experience where you're also going to get the best insights from them as well. What else are you guys seeing? You guys sit in a really interesting seat in the industry. I've always really enjoyed your perspective as well, and love the conversations that we've had over the past few months on things. But what are some of the things that you guys are seeing, call it for good, for bad, or ugly, that we can unpack a little bit further?
I think, well, you mentioned AI moderated interviews, and I've talked a lot about this recently, but I was at IAX, and I've been on the conference circuit, and there's so many companies out there that are doing some sort of AI moderated qual. And I love how you just outlined the benefits to it. There's so many. And so we have clients that are looking for those types of features. And so I felt like I need to do demos, I need to talk to them. And it was really overwhelming. There's so many of these companies out there. And so something I'm seeing is this influx of all these new companies that are probably more tech oriented companies, and some are more grounded in research than others. And they have all these great features around AI moderated qualitative, and there's a wide spectrum of quality and use cases for them. And it was honestly a little overwhelming for me to try to determine which of these horses do we hitch to, right? Which
Yeah.
one is going to be the Qualtrics of the future and be a billion or a multi-billion dollar company? Which ones are going to go away? Which ones are going to be acquired? Which one, has the best service? And so I had to back off, and actually spoke to a couple of more traditional companies that are also investing, but also don't have the Series A, Series B funding to just jump all in on the technology. And so that's something I think I'm struggling with when I talk to people, others are struggling with, not just with AI moderated qual, but all of the AI tools. In our world,
Yeah.
synthetic quantitative sample, right? There's all these companies out there. And do we go with digital twins? Do we go with personas? We have a partnership with the Qualtrics Edge team. It's very different. It's simulated human data. They're using training data for years to build. And, as a researcher, it's challenging to try to ground ourselves in research principles and methodologies, yet not get left behind in the technology and innovation side, and bring the best solutions to our clients, which are going to be a combination of these things moving forward, right? The companies that are going to win are the ones that leverage methodology with the innovative tools that we have on hand now. Um, it's such differentiator now, and so it's just overwhelming to try to figure that out. It's part of my role. That's one thing I would say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. I think it's not even just in this industry, just in our kind of
Right.
daily lives running a company. There's so many different tools and technologies that have emerged out there, and the pace of which new ones are popping up. Another thing is like the pace of some of the venture funding of some of these as well. Like I spend a lot of time in financial data, and we kind of have this meme, since I always include a lighthearted meme in my newsletter. That's, I'm building the world's 37th first AI powered private equity analyst,
Right.
or 37th world's first. And it's it's completely overwhelming, I think, from the end users. And what I've personally found is just kind of always taking back things back to what is really the problem that I'm trying to solve for. And if I'm in a business that serves clients, which we all are, like, what is the problem I'm trying to solve for my client, and what is my client asking for? And one of the things, I've largely stayed out of the synthetic data and digital twin conversation. And I think part of that is I don't see as many clients really asking for that, or if they are asking for it, it's very like surface level. And we saw it with MCP as something as well. People were asking us if we had an MCP server, and we likely will shortly. But I would always ask them back, like, is that a requirement? Are you actually using this? Is that how your team prefers to actually get data? And just asking that simple follow-up question, I usually find out someone says, no, we just kind of wanted to know if it was on your roadmap. And we had one person on our team who was just playing around with some stuff with Claude,
Right.
and wanted to see, but no, our team has not rolled out any major AI tool
Right.
across the board where we would enable this. And so I think sometimes, even if at like surface level, it sounds like that's what a customer is asking for, just making sure that we're also doing that diligence and working with them to find out, like, is that really the most pertinent thing going on? And not to say I'm not a believer in any of those things,
Yeah.
and synthetic. I think there's different use cases for all of them, but I always like it to bring it back to the use case. And then one of the other things I'd encourage, and not saying you have to do this across 45 different AI moderator companies, as your time is valuable as well. But we talk a lot in this industry, and I don't think enough people really do it. We actually asked this at SampleCon to the audience, how many people have actually signed up for their own panel and gone through that experience?
Yeah. Yeah. We talk
Every
about that all
single
the
year
time.
in this
Yep.
industry, people talk about doing that, and I could not believe how few hands went up, especially after
After
my
researching.
presentation was me signing up for everyone in the room's panels
Yes.
and going through that experience and showing what it looked like. But when it came to AI moderated technologies, a lot of our clients, especially on the expert network side of the industry, I and my co-founders, we were some of the earliest beta testers for them. We said, they came to us and said, hey, would you be willing to test this out with us? We want you to be the expert. You'll do an expert call that's not going to go anywhere except to us on like one of your prior roles, and give us feedback on it. And it was really interesting to see from an expert standpoint, and the perspective I was looking at it was giving them feedback on how well of a call do I think that the AI moderator did, just as I, in my head, judge humans on that too. When I'm talking to different end clients, I am certainly thinking about, like, was that a good question or not, or does this person really seem like they know this industry? And some people tell me right up front, hey, I'm just brand new to this industry. This is gonna be like a one level call. So, and many times I expect a certain line of questions, but I was able to kind of give some feedback on at times, saying, "Hey, I think it only actually got about 75% of my insights, and here's why." Or one of the things that I didn't like with one was that it would read me back my response after I answered every question. And it actually dragged out like the time of the call. So it was a 60-minute call, but they actually only really got 30 minutes of Q&A in. And so I would definitely say, like, just try it out from the other side. I think that's just like the best way to go about it, is to put yourself in the seat from each persona that's going to be interacting with it, and try something that, as I'm sure you already have, but just kind of encouraging like the rest of the industry to do this. Otherwise, you're kind of just going off of like the word of a fancy, a fancy PDF and a salesperson along the way, and everyone will say that they have the best underlying model and they trained on the best data
Right.
and stuff like that.
Yep.
So there will likely be many winners in the industry. I don't believe that many things at all are winner take all market. But I think that the best way to go about it is just to try it from the personas that you know how to evaluate it from.
Cool. I wanted to touch on, I know we're probably getting short on time, but it feels like your finance background is still like a passion of yours to understand investments in our industry. And it's something I'm certainly interested in. I'd love high level what's happening from a financial standpoint in marketing research and maybe marketing research adjacent industries. It feels like, from my perspective, that investors want more insights. They see the value we bring to brands, and there's a lot of money coming in. But I'm starting to see a little bit of yellow flags out there. And so you know this a lot better than I do. I'd love kind of a couple takes on this.
Yeah, there's kind of we'll call it kind of that double-edged sword or some of those yellow flags. I think going back to one that I just mentioned, like this 37th world's first
Yeah.
of something, and kind of the marketing that comes along with that, where a lot of these companies aren't really differentiated and they are raising. There's been a really fast clip of raises, particularly at the seed and Series A level. I think you're inevitably going to see a bigger drop off before the B round, especially when, real true revenue and growth start to matter. Especially in certain markets where there is the TAM is probably not as large as I think some people necessarily think that it
Hmm.
is. And we've already seen within the AI world a number of different companies. People usually refer to them as like wrappers on top of ChatGPT that enabled some workflow. Like some of the
Yeah.
first ones were the ability to upload a PDF. That wasn't something that I think you could do in the first version of ChatGPT.
Right.
Um, and then a couple weeks later, OpenAI launches that capability. And I don't know that I don't want to, negate anyone who's still building that space, but I'm personally not aware of anyone that I've ever used in outside of that just to be able to upload a PDF to something. And so you're going to see, I think, more and more of these things. Is kind of the old question people used to ask is why can't Google do this? And now it's why can't Anthropic do this? Why can't OpenAI
Right.
do this? I do believe there is room for people with like deep subject matter domain expertise and building into certain client workflows, especially where the largest companies out there in the world are not necessarily going to go as deep on those industries and those workflows because they're trying to build products that just appeal to a much wider audience and as a result aren't going to be able to spend as much time on the other parts. But I think there's definitely been a lot of funding. One of the things that does excite me is that there's been some really marquee names that have been investing in the space. So some of the largest venture capital firms and some really sophisticated private equity firms have bought stakes or outright bought companies, especially recently, in the market research space, which I think is really exciting. And not knowing or not commenting on like the details of the economics of all those deals or valuations. I think it's really exciting to see a lot of these names spend more time focused on an industry that, especially historically, was largely bootstrapped.
Right.
And so it's exciting to see some of this institutional capital that is coming into the space. But I think at the same time, there are also a lot of people who are trying to figure out what their next move is and what their exit is. And if they've been around for a while, they may be nicely cash flow positive, they may be growing. But if I'm to use kind of public markets as a bellwether, whether there are a lot of companies that are beating on revenue and their stock price is dropping 10 to 30% on their earnings date, and they are just getting crushed on their forward-looking guidance. And a lot of it has to do with threat of AI, but it's sort of this interesting dynamic now where people who have built really good businesses and I think, a lot of people built for like when everyone needed to be a SaaS company because that's what investors told them they needed to be. Now having to rethink what that business model looks like. And I love to see when people make quick adaptations and are open to that change. And I think those are the companies that we'll see continue to grow. But I'm equally, if I'm to talk about kind of the yellow flag side, seeing companies that are still stuck on large scale, six-figure contracts, year-long recurring revenue, when their opportunity may actually be much larger if they did something more consumption based, and they're missing opportunities and losing customers because of not wanting to change some of that commercial model. And I'm in no way saying I know everything. Like, I'm not saying I could come into
Right.
any of these companies. That would be really foolish and arrogant of me to say. But I think overall, when I look at the industry and when I'm talking to a lot of investors, whether that's venture investors or private equity that I spend a lot of time with, just kind of as a friendly and helping people to navigate this space, one of the things that they're getting hung up on is either people don't really know what their strategy is moving forward or aren't effectively conveying that, or they recognize that they do need to change some of their business model to adapt. And there's been a hesitance on that along the way. And so I'm very bullish on this industry overall. I am a true believer that like human knowledge is one of the only like true forms of proprietary information that exists out there, and I think becomes even more powerful in this AI world. And that's one of the things that I'm most excited about. And I think when people look at that really big picture, that's why you're seeing a lot of institutional venture capital from marquee names coming into this space, because they're seeing that much bigger vision further downstream. But that doesn't mean there aren't those sort of yellow flags along the way, or an overcrowding in some areas as well. What are
Yeah.
you guys seeing on that? That was a long-winded answer from me. But I do track it in my newsletter, weekly M&A funding, people moves, and just a total geek and like excited about this industry and excited to see people grow businesses in this space. But of course it does come with, where are we looking at like a bubble? Where are we looking at? What are some of
Yeah.
the hurdles people are running into in these deal processes? And I believe more people should talk about those openly, which is, I think this has been a great community for people sharing some of those insights.
Overall, I see what you are seeing as well. And the trend that I would kind of call out actually rather complements, the kind of the core mission of your company, Dan, which is that the innovation that's happening in our space because of the financial investment, it makes me feel optimistic. Ever since I started, I've been doing this for over a decade now, and right off the bat, quality was the sample quality measured as post field removals was kind of like one of the main key performance indicators for quote unquote how good the online research was. Over the last 10 years, it's shifted away from, hey, this is important, to this is a crisis. And all these new tools, like you mentioned, AI moderated interviews allow us to have people participate when it is convenient for them, which will increase, panelist retention because they're able to have access to these high incentive opportunities. Companies like yours, of course, right? You're having more efficient sampling, which improves the respondent experience, so on and so forth. And there's a lot of these technologies that I think are going to help us steer out of this commoditization and poor quality sample nosedive. And we've been trying for, and maybe this is too pessimistic or condemning, but like I feel like we've spent 5 years trying to fix this as panel companies and as researchers, and have really, it's gotten worse. Everyone talks about it ad nauseum, but nothing's really getting better. But companies like yours, companies like the all those startups that were at IAEX, right? I think we have a really good opportunity for some of the innovation that's coming from new investment to help us correct this problem in really unique ways.
I agree with you on that, and I think that it almost kind of like strikes a chord there. I think we've even openly talked about as an industry how much worse it's gotten since the industry started talking about it. And coming from other industries previously, it's actually the only industry I've worked in that talks about the problems this much, which on one hand is a good thing.
Oh,
I
that's
do
great to
like the
hear. Yeah.
openness. I do like not everyone pretending and just doing what their marketing team says and saying that they're great at everything. So I
Yeah.
love that about it. At the same time, I always find myself saying, well, like, has anyone really unpacked the problem fully? And let's not just talk about the problem, but let's start talking more about solutions. And so I'm excited that I think the industry is starting to embrace more solutions as it relates to technology for like fraud prevention and fraud detection.
Mhm.
But I do still think that we have a long way to go as it relates to some of like I'll keep saying, like, the non-fraudulent experience. So people are spending more time on fraud and not looking at, well, how do you treat your good people and make sure to continue to get the right insights out of them? And you sort of have to do everything. I don't think you can like just do one of these things. I've had conversations with companies who thought they solved their fraud problem like further downstream, and then I go onto their website and I sign up and I say my name's Bill Gates and I'm the CEO of Microsoft, the former CEO of Microsoft. And I can put in any like Gmail address on there and say that. And I usually point that out to them like, you're doing identity verification like further downstream, but then identity verification is not the same as workplace verification, which
Mhm.
also does not solve embellishment. So saying that I'm more
Right.
knowledgeable about something than I actually am, or that I was a key decision maker on something when I was actually just in the room and saw a demo, these are some of the types of things that I think as you look at different parts of the ecosystem, some of those types of things are actually like more on the mind of the end clients than the actual like true identity fraud or bot farms or automation that's going on. But I do think as an industry, like, people need to almost just start doing it and solving it more, like, and trying out different things, seeing what works, and going through that whole experience themselves, because really just starting to spend more time in at market research conferences over the past 2 years, like, I'm already fatigued on the conversation. It's and shocked at times that we're still having some of the same conversation just 2 years later, never mind 5 or 25 across the industry. So not meant to be like bearish on that on the industry, but I do think that there are interesting companies out there that are just spending their time not just talking about it, but solving it, delivering to their clients, and their business metrics are showing the results of that, while others just kind of continue to sort of have that circular conversation along the way.
Well, Dan, thank you so much. This was awesome. I really appreciate you coming on. I think everybody should go out there and at least follow you on LinkedIn. I love your updates that you give, especially on the financial side, and other stuff is awesome too. But how can people reach out to you?
Yeah, LinkedIn, email, Dan at acknowledge.ai, AGG, not AG, uh, and not agricultural knowledge. But yeah, LinkedIn's probably the best way. I'm very active on there. I cross post my newsletter on there, or it's available. It's called It's Pronounced Data. It's hosted on Beehive. And yeah, that's also just kind of one of my favorite things just to do on the side. It's something I've been doing for almost 6 years now, across kind of the overall information services and market research space. And the conversations that it's drummed up have been just like one of the perks to me. I'm my number one customer on it. I read through everything that I put in there and reach out to plenty of people and congratulate them on roles. And so it's really been exciting to do that. And why I bring that up is probably about 50% of the content on there people send me throughout the week, and ask me to put in there. So if ever anyone has any moves coming up, or wants to announce it, like, I love to have that feedback. It helps me just even get a broader view on what's going on in the market, but more importantly, the relationships, and the human conversations that have come from that, has just been something that I'm really grateful, for. And I don't want to say proud of myself, but I'm happy for myself that I get
Yeah.
that perk. And so yeah, please do reach out, if you want to learn more about Acknowledge or just chat about the broader space. And Brian, Andrew, thanks so much for having me on. I love talking with you guys as always. Keep up the good work, and yeah, hopefully it'd be really interesting if we do this in a year from now. See what's changed.
Yeah,
So maybe we'll have to pencil that in.
for sure. Absolutely. Well, thanks again for joining, and to all our listeners, thank you for listening. Have a great week.